In the high-powered world of law, Liam Caldwell, a CEO known for his control and ambition, finds his life turned upside down when he meets Ella Dawson, a fierce lawyer with a past she won't forget. Their professional partnership quickly becomes personal, filled with tension, secrets, and undeniable chemistry. As they battle corrupt corporations and face their own emotional walls, they must decide, will they fight for justice or for each other? Where are you watching from, and how do you think their story will unfold? Don't forget to subscribe for more gripping tales like this one. At the Bryant Park Hotel, a gala in celebration of Caldwell & Associates' 25th anniversary lit up the ballroom with sparkling chandeliers casting a golden hue over New York's elite. The air buzzed with clinking champagne glasses and proud speeches. At the center of the event stood Liam Caldwell, the 33-year-old CEO of the law firm. Tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored black suit, he exuded an air of authority, his gray eyes sharp as ever, scanning the room with the commanding presence of someone who ruled a courtroom. Despite his usual composure, tonight was different. His mind wasn't on strategy or closing deals, but on something far more disconcerting: his own uncertainty. Liam had always been a man of control, someone who prided himself on dismantling opponents with precision, whether in court or the boardroom. Yet the past few weeks had been nothing short of a nightmare. His firm's aggressive expansion plans were met with opposition from the board, leaving him on edge. To add to that, his mother, a controlling and calculating figure, had called earlier, reminding him once again of his failure to find a suitable wife. "You're not getting any younger, Liam. The family needs an heir." Her words echoed in his mind, the weight of expectation pressing down on him. He wasn't just a CEO, he was the head of the Caldwell legacy, and yet his personal life was in shambles. As the evening wore on, Liam found himself seeking solace at the bar, away from the buzzing crowds. He wasn't a man prone to indulgence, but tonight he needed to drown out the noise, to forget the constant pressure. He ordered a whiskey, the burn of it soothing the sharp edges of his mind. Another glass followed, and then another, until the polished and composed CEO was reduced to a clumsy, slurring version of himself. Across town, in a dimly lit bar called the Rusty Gavel, Ella Dawson sat nursing her third martini. At 30, Ella had recently quit her job as an attorney at Whitestone and Hayes after exposing corruption within the firm. Her former colleagues had tried to bury her, offering a settlement and a veiled threat to stay silent. Yet, she couldn't silence the truth. Now, with her career in shambles and her bank account running low, she was drowning her frustrations in alcohol. Her auburn hair spilled from its neat bun, mingling with the harsh laughter and muttered complaints of disgruntled lawyers who thought the world owed them something. Ella didn't expect to see anyone she knew tonight, and she certainly didn't expect to wake up in a luxury penthouse the next morning. In her tipsy haze, she had taken the wrong key card, one meant for a VIP suite. Stumbling out of the bar, she entered the elevator, thinking nothing of it. When she finally entered the penthouse, she was so disoriented by the lavish surroundings that she didn't even question the opulence. She kicked off her shoes, collapsed onto the king-sized bed, and passed out almost immediately. Meanwhile, Liam, still reeling from his night of whiskey and self-pity, was escorted back to his suite by his assistant. Muttering about the board meeting and his mother's latest lecture, he fumbled with his tie, his usual grace nowhere to be found. He crashed into the bed, blissfully unaware that someone else was already occupying half of it. Morning came too quickly. The sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, stabbing at Liam's temples with the force of a courtroom gavel. He groaned, his head pounding, as he blinked against the unfamiliar surroundings. The soft scent of jasmine lingered in the air, and it wasn't long before he noticed the cascade of auburn hair spilling across the pillow. A woman, in his bed. Liam shot upright, panic coursing through him. This wasn't who he was. He didn't bring strangers into his life, much less into his private space. He couldn't remember the details of last night, but this felt wrong. His sharp eyes searched the room, landing on the woman now stirring beside him. Her face was half hidden by the sheets, her dress rumpled, a faint smear of mascara across her cheeks. She was beautiful in a way that was both disheveled and captivating. "Who are you?" Liam's voice was low, icy, laced with suspicion, as he leaned closer. The woman's eyes snapped open, green and sharp, even in her grogginess. "I'm the one who should be asking that," she shot back, her voice firm and unwavering despite the confusion. "This is my room. You're trespassing." "Your room?" Liam raised an eyebrow, disbelief written all over his face. He gestured around the suite. "This is my penthouse. I've owned it for 3 years. You're the one trespassing." Ella blinked, her confidence faltering for a moment, but she quickly rallied. "Nice try, lawyer guy. I have a key card and a booking contract that proves I belong here. You, on the other hand, look like you crawled out of a losing trial and stumbled into the wrong bed." Liam's heart raced as he watched her, a strange thrill running through him. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not so boldly. "Take one more step toward me, and I'll sue you for assault," she threatened, her voice cutting through the tension like a well-practiced argument in court. The battle lines were drawn, but neither of them was prepared for the spark of attraction, the undeniable tension that would soon alter the course of their lives forever. The days following their unexpected encounter in the penthouse suite were nothing short of chaotic. Liam Caldwell and Ella Dawson could hardly avoid each other. Not that either of them was particularly trying. Their legal minds clashed just as much as their personal differences did. But something about their shared tension made it impossible to ignore the magnetic pull between them. What started as a confrontation over mistaken identities and trespassing soon became a partnership neither expected or wanted. Liam's firm, Caldwell & Associates, was embroiled in a critical case involving Apex Pharmaceuticals, a former client, now at the center of a bribery scandal. The case threatened not only the firm's reputation, but also its future, and Liam knew he needed someone sharp enough to tackle the loopholes, someone who wasn't afraid to go head-to-head with powerful enemies. He had heard about Ella's boldness in exposing corruption at her previous firm, and despite his reservations, he offered her a chance to join the team. Ella, on the other hand, had no intentions of returning to the corporate world after everything she had been through. She had walked away from Whitestone and Hayes when they failed to support her in exposing her corrupt boss, and now she was rebuilding her career, one step at a time. But Liam's offer wasn't something she could easily dismiss. He had resources that could help her take down Kessler & Klein, the law firm that had destroyed her career. But trusting Liam, the cold, calculating CEO, wasn't an easy decision. Still, she was desperate, and this might be her only shot at justice. The tension in their first few days working together was palpable. Liam, used to being in control of every situation, couldn't help but be frustrated by Ella's disregard for the rules. She didn't dress in the typical corporate attire. She didn't sit at her desk in silence, cranking out legal documents. Instead, she was loud, sarcastic, and defiant. Qualities that irked Liam but also intrigued him. She was the first person to challenge his authority in a long time, and despite himself, he found himself enjoying their verbal sparring. Ella, for her part, didn't care about Liam's reputation. She didn't care about his power or his influence. To her, he was just another privileged CEO who thought the world revolved around him. But as she spent more time at Caldwell & Associates, her disdain for him began to soften. Liam had moments where his cold exterior cracked, and she could see that beneath his professional armor was a man who was deeply flawed, much like herself. The more they interacted, the more she realized that there was more to him than just the high-powered lawyer. He was driven, yes, but also vulnerable. His ambition tainted by a profound fear of failure, one that he masked behind a facade of control. As the legal battles escalated, so did the stakes. They spent long hours in the office, analyzing documents, preparing evidence, and strategizing their next moves. Ella became more and more integrated into the firm's operations, impressing everyone with her sharp mind and her ability to spot legal loopholes faster than anyone else. But the tension between her and Liam remained, sometimes simmering beneath the surface, sometimes exploding into full-blown arguments. They clashed over everything: strategy, priorities, even personal boundaries. Yet through every heated debate, there was an undeniable undercurrent of something else, something neither of them was ready to confront. One evening, after an exhausting day of strategizing for the Apex case, Ella stood in the kitchen, her sleeves rolled up, making herself an omelette. She had taken it upon herself to organize Liam's chaotic kitchen, much to his dismay. He had made it clear that he didn't need help, but she had insisted. The clattering of pans and the soft hum of jazz filled the apartment as she cooked, trying to find a sense of normalcy in the chaos that had become her life since joining Liam's firm. Liam, who had been buried in paperwork at the dining table, looked up. His gray eyes narrowed as he watched her flip the omelette with far too much confidence. "You're not the first person to try and organize my life, you know," he muttered, his tone dry. Ella smirked without turning around. "Well, I'm better at it than you are, and this place is a mess. You can't run a firm if you can't even organize your kitchen." Liam rolled his eyes, trying to hide the smile that tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I don't need a life organizer, Dawson," he said, his voice softer than usual. But she didn't miss the look in his eyes, the one that spoke of unspoken admiration. "I'm just trying to help," she replied, flipping the omelette onto a plate and sliding it toward him. "Eat. You need fuel if you're going to win this case." There was a brief silence as Liam stared at the plate, still unsure of what had just transpired. For the first time in days, he didn't feel the weight of the world on his shoulders. The simple act of sharing a meal with Ella, even in the midst of everything that was happening, felt like a small moment of peace. But peace was short-lived. The Apex case was far from over, and the stakes continued to rise. As Liam and Ella dug deeper into the firm's dealings with Apex Pharmaceuticals, they discovered a massive conspiracy, one that could bring Caldwell and Associates to its knees. With the evidence they had uncovered, they were on the brink of exposing not just Apex's corruption, but their own firm's involvement. The more they worked together, the more the lines between professional and personal blurred. Neither of them was ready to admit it, but the connection they shared was undeniable. Both fiercely independent and unwilling to show weakness, they found themselves caught in a delicate dance between power and vulnerability, trust and suspicion. It was a legal battle they could not win alone, and yet neither of them was willing to back down. As the days passed, the tension between Liam and Ella escalated, becoming more than just professional. Their legal strategies were flawless, but their personal battles were something else entirely. Each encounter was charged with unspoken words, lingering gazes, and a sense of something deeper that neither was willing to acknowledge, at least not yet. Every heated argument, every sharp word exchanged, only seemed to pull them closer in ways neither of them could fully comprehend. Liam, though driven by his need for control, began to feel something new when it came to Ella. She was a force of nature, a woman who didn't bow to him or his authority, and that was both infuriating and exhilarating. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone who was as fiercely independent as Ella. She refused to be intimidated by him, something that piqued his curiosity and in some ways unsettled him. He had spent years building his empire, carefully curating the image of the flawless CEO, but Ella saw through that facade. She saw him as a man, not as a symbol of power. And for the first time in years, he found himself disarmed. Ella, for her part, remained steadfast in her own resolve. She had no intention of being drawn into Liam's world, not in the way he expected. Her focus remained on the case, on taking down Kessler and Klein and exposing the corruption that had nearly destroyed her. Working with Liam wasn't something she had planned, but it was a necessity. His resources were vast, and she needed them if she had any hope of winning this battle. But the more she interacted with him, the harder it became to separate the man from the CEO. He had his weaknesses, his doubts, and for reasons she couldn't fully explain, those vulnerabilities made her want to understand him more. One night, after an intense day of reviewing evidence, Liam found himself in his office, staring at the mountains of legal documents in front of him. He had never been one for distractions, but tonight, the thought of Ella consumed him. She had been in and out of his office all day, sharp, focused, and relentless in her pursuit of justice. Yet, there was something else. Something in the way she looked at him, something in the way she stood her ground, that kept him on edge. He couldn't explain it, but he felt the pull every time their paths crossed. Meanwhile, Ella was in the penthouse, trying to focus on the piles of legal briefs in front of her. She'd been avoiding Liam all evening, knowing full well that their last encounter had been too much, too raw, too intense. She wasn't sure what was happening between them, but she wasn't ready to confront it. Not yet. She picked up the phone to dial a contact in the investigation, but her hand hovered over the screen as her mind wandered back to Liam. His gaze, so intense and commanding, had a way of making her feel both vulnerable and empowered all at once. She hated that feeling. The ringing of her phone broke her thoughts. It was Liam. She hesitated before answering, unsure of what to expect. "Dawson," he said, his voice low but steady. "You up for another round of legal warfare?" She smirked, despite herself. "I don't know. You seem to think I need to be repaired after our last discussion." Liam chuckled, a sound she hadn't heard from him in days. "I think we both could use a break from our normal tactics. But you're right, there's more to this than just law." Her heart skipped a beat. "What's that supposed to mean?" Liam was quiet for a moment before responding, his voice softer now. "I've been thinking about this case, about you, and what comes after. You're right, this isn't just about law. It's about what we're willing to fight for. And I don't know about you, but I'm starting to wonder if I'm fighting for the right reasons." Ella's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't sure if he meant what she thought he meant, but the vulnerability in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't the Liam she had come to know, the confident, controlled CEO. This was a man who was questioning everything, and that revelation unsettled her in a way she couldn't describe. "You're not the only one with doubts," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "I'm not just here for the case. I'm here because I believe in what we're doing, even if I can't always understand why we keep pushing each other to the edge." Liam's voice softened. "Maybe we push each other because we're both too afraid to admit what we really want." For a moment, there was a long silence between them, the weight of their unspoken feelings hanging in the air. They both knew what was at stake. Everything they had built, everything they had fought for, but neither of them had anticipated how much their professional lives would intertwine with their personal ones. Ella stood at the window, looking out at the city below, her heart racing. What if this isn't just about the case anymore, Liam? What if this is something we can't control? Liam was silent, but she knew he understood. The truth hung between them, unspoken but undeniable. They were both locked in a battle, one they couldn't win alone, one that had moved beyond the courtroom and into something far more dangerous, far more intimate. And as Ella stared out at the skyline, she couldn't help but wonder if this case, their case, was just the beginning of something much bigger, something neither of them could escape. "Let's finish what we started," Liam finally said, his voice steady again. "Together." And for the first time, Ella wasn't sure if that meant just the case or if it meant something more. Something neither of them was ready to face. But as the night stretched on, she knew one thing for certain: whatever happened next, they would face it together. The days that followed only intensified the strange, electric tension between Liam and Ella. Their professional partnership, born of necessity, had gradually begun to reveal a more personal undercurrent neither of them was prepared to confront. They were working side by side, day after day, fighting battles in the courtroom and in the boardroom, but their most dangerous fight was the one they were waging within themselves. Liam had always been a man who thrived on control. His success, his empire, had been built on meticulous precision, on the unwavering belief that rationality could solve any problem. But Ella, with her fire and unpredictability, had shattered that belief. She wasn't just challenging him in the courtroom. She was breaking down the walls he had carefully constructed around his emotions. She was sharp, relentless, and fearless. But most of all, she didn't need him. She didn't care about his status or his wealth, and that, more than anything, made him want to understand her. Made him want to break down his own walls. And Ella, for all her fierce independence, found herself drawn to him in a way she couldn't explain. Liam Caldwell was everything she had tried to avoid, a man who hid behind his power, a man whose cold exterior masked a deep vulnerability she hadn't expected to see. She hated that she found herself intrigued by him, fascinated even. She hated that he made her question her own resolve, made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than just fighting for justice. But the cracks in their professional relationship began to widen when Liam's ex-fiancée, Lauren, reappeared. She walked into the office one afternoon like a ghost from Liam's past, with a cold smile and a hidden agenda. Ella had heard about her, of course, the perfect woman who had left Liam at the altar, citing his emotional distance and obsession with work. The news had made headlines, but now, seeing Lauren in the flesh, standing there with her polished appearance and calm demeanor, Ella couldn't help but feel a twinge of something she couldn't name. Liam's reaction was immediate, his usually composed demeanor faltering as soon as he laid eyes on her. It was as though the past had come rushing back, and Ella could see the conflict in his eyes. The pain he had buried so deep was surfacing, and for the first time, Ella saw the rawness in him that he had so carefully hidden from the world. "I never thought I'd see you again," Liam said, his voice tight, barely containing the hurt beneath his words. Lauren's smile was faint but still there, like a reminder of something Liam had lost. "I didn't think I'd see you either," she replied, her eyes flicking toward Ella before returning to Liam. "I just wanted to apologize for everything. I was wrong to leave you the way I did." Ella stood frozen, a bystander to the painful history unfolding before her. She could feel the weight of Lauren's apology, and though part of her wanted to trust the sincerity in her words, she couldn't ignore the creeping feeling of jealousy and insecurity that rose in her chest. But it wasn't about Lauren. Not really. It was about what Lauren represented, the life Liam had chosen before he had met Ella. The life of perfection, of order and control. A life that Ella couldn't imagine fitting into, no matter how much she might be drawn to Liam. The meeting was tense, and Ella found herself stepping out of the room, needing space to breathe. She didn't want to witness the emotional turmoil Liam was going through, but she also couldn't ignore the fact that Lauren had just reopened old wounds. The worst part, Ella realized, was that she was now tangled in Liam's past, and she didn't know if she was ready to face that reality. As she walked through the corridors of Caldwell & Associates, the weight of the situation began to settle on her shoulders. She didn't need to be a part of this. She didn't need to be caught up in Liam's emotional drama. She had her own battles to fight. But the truth was, she didn't want to walk away. She didn't want to lose what had started between them, even if it terrified her to admit it. What they had was messy, complicated, and full of contradictions, but there was something there, something worth fighting for. That night, as Liam sat alone in his office, the familiar tension between them returned. Ella knocked on the door, standing in the threshold for a moment before stepping inside. "Is she gone?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. Liam nodded, his expression unreadable. "Yeah, she's gone." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of the past and the uncertainty of their future hung in the air, thick and heavy. Finally, Ella spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Liam, I don't know what this is between us, but I can't pretend it doesn't matter." Liam's eyes softened, the hardness that had been in them all day melting away. He stood, crossing the room to where she stood, and for the first time, he didn't hide from her gaze. "It matters to me too," he said, his voice low. "I'm not perfect, Ella. I never was. But I'm willing to fight for this, for you." Ella looked at him, her heart racing. She knew this wasn't going to be easy. They both had their scars, their baggage, their fears. But maybe, just maybe, fighting for each other was the one thing they were both willing to do. And with that, they took the first step toward something neither of them had expected, something neither of them was prepared for. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for the first time it felt like they were on the same side, together. As the weeks passed, the penthouse became a battleground, not just for legal arguments and strategic decisions, but for the most complicated case of all, one that neither Liam nor Ella had ever anticipated. Their professional alliance had turned into something far more personal, more dangerous, and infinitely more fragile. Each day they spent together brought them closer, but each night they went to bed knowing there were things they weren't ready to face. The case against Apex Pharmaceuticals had escalated to the point where both Liam and Ella were neck-deep in legal battles, corporate espionage, and threats from every corner. The stakes were higher than ever, and neither of them was willing to back down. But in the middle of it all, amidst the tense strategy meetings and late-night document reviews, something else began to unfold. A slow, undeniable shift in their dynamic. Liam, who had always prided himself on control, found himself powerless in the face of Ella's presence. She was like a force of nature, fierce, unrelenting, and unapologetically herself. She didn't need his approval, and she didn't care about the power he wielded, and that terrified him. Because no matter how hard he tried to stay detached, to remain focused on the case, he couldn't ignore the way she made him feel, like a man, not just a CEO. It was a vulnerability he hadn't allowed himself to experience in years. Ella, on the other hand, was torn. She had spent her entire career proving she didn't need anyone. She didn't need Liam's approval or his resources. But the more time she spent in his world, the more she realized that her feelings for him were growing in ways she couldn't control. She hated that she was falling for him, but it was happening. And the worst part was that she wasn't sure if she could handle it. One particularly heated evening, after a long day of legal wrangling, they found themselves alone in the penthouse. The air was thick with tension. Ella was sitting at the large marble kitchen counter, her eyes scanning through case files, while Liam paced, his mind racing with the implications of the Apex case. The silence between them was deafening, each of them lost in their own thoughts but unable to ignore the electric energy that crackled in the space. Liam stopped pacing and turned to face her. His eyes, usually so guarded, were now wide open, searching hers for something. An answer, a sign, anything that would ease the uncertainty that had taken root in his chest. "Ella, we can't keep doing this," he said, his voice low, almost pleading. Ella looked up, meeting his gaze. She could feel the weight of the moment. She knew exactly what he meant. The professional distance they had maintained for so long had started to crumble, and neither of them was ready to rebuild it. But they couldn't ignore the truth any longer. "You're right," she replied, her voice quieter than usual. "We can't. But we're too deep in this to back out now. We can't walk away from the case, or from each other." The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, neither of them knew how to respond. The battle they were fighting was no longer just about legal strategy. It was about trust, about vulnerability, about the things they were both afraid to admit. Liam took a step closer to her, his eyes intense. "Ella, But before he could finish, the sound of the elevator doors opening interrupted him. Both of them froze, turning toward the source of the noise. A familiar voice rang out in the hallway. "Liam, we need to talk." It was his mother, Eleanor Whitmore, the woman who had always been a constant presence in his life, whether he wanted it or not. Liam's expression hardened, and Ella could see the flicker of discomfort in his eyes. She knew what was coming. Eleanor entered the penthouse with her usual air of authority, her gaze sweeping over the space before landing on her son. "I've been hearing things," she said, her tone sharp. "I don't like what I hear. You've been distracted, Liam, and that's not like you." Liam's jaw clenched. He didn't need to hear another lecture from his mother, especially not now. He was already dealing with enough: Apex, the firm's future, and the growing tension between him and Ella. He didn't have the energy to fight her battles, too. "Mom, not now," he said, his voice clipped. "I'm busy." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "I don't care how busy you are. You're not a child anymore, Liam. You have responsibilities, both to this firm and to this family." Ella stood up slowly, her frustration bubbling to the surface. She couldn't stand the way Eleanor spoke to Liam, as though he were still that same boy who had to follow her every command. Ella had seen the cracks in Liam's armor before, but they were more apparent now. He wasn't just fighting for the future of his firm, he was fighting for his own sense of self and for the right to make his own choices. "I think we've heard enough," Ella said, her voice calm but firm. She stepped forward, positioning herself between Liam and his mother. "Liam's life isn't yours to control, Eleanor. He's capable of making his own decisions." Eleanor's eyes widened in shock. "Who are you to speak to me like that? I'm someone who respects him enough to know that he doesn't need your approval to succeed." Ella shot back, her gaze unwavering. The room fell silent, and for the first time, Liam felt a sense of relief. Ella was standing up for him in a way no one ever had. She wasn't just fighting for the case, she was fighting for him. Eleanor, taken aback by the confrontation, glared at them both. But before she could respond, Liam spoke, his voice low but resolute. "Mom, I'm done," he said, his decision final. "This is my life. I'm going to live it the way I see fit." Eleanor's expression faltered for a moment, but she quickly masked it with a scowl. "I see you've made your choice," she said, her voice dripping with disappointment. "Don't expect me to clean up the mess." With that, she turned and walked out, leaving Liam and Ella standing in the middle of the penthouse, their hearts racing, their lives hanging in the balance. As the door closed behind Eleanor, Ella turned to Liam, her voice soft. "That wasn't easy, was it?" Liam shook his head. "No, but it was necessary." He stepped closer to her, his gaze locking with hers. "Thank you." Ella smiled, her heart swelling with something she couldn't quite name. "Anytime, Whitmore. Anytime." And for the first time in what felt like forever, Liam didn't feel like he was fighting alone. He had someone by his side, someone who believed in him, who saw him for who he truly was, not just what he represented. And in that moment, he knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. This story teaches us that true strength lies not in perfection or control, but in vulnerability and trust. Liam and Ella, two people who seemed so different at the start, both learned that success isn't just about winning cases or controlling outcomes. It's about being true to oneself, facing fears, and trusting others enough to let them in. Their journey shows us that even in the high-stakes world of law and power, love, respect, and mutual support can break down the toughest barriers. It's about letting go of the past, embracing growth, and understanding that the best victories are those won together. What did you think of their journey? Where are you watching from? And how did this story resonate with you? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt stories like this one.